Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Future Work World, the podcast that focuses on the now and next of all things work. My name is Barry Winkless, head of the Future Work Institute, and thank you very much for joining us today. You will notice that we're not in the podcast studio today due to various commitments, but that will not impact, hopefully, the quality of what you're about to hear. Now, before we go on to our interview for this podcast, I would like to make a little bit of a plug of my new book, Future Work World, How Leaders Can Create Destinations for Talent that entice, excite, and engage. It's been published by Wiley in January 2026, so it's only a couple of months from now, and we will be doing a special on the book over the next probably 1 to 2 months. So please keep an eye out for that. It's going to be sold across all bookshop, all online marketplaces. Thank you. And now on to our guest for the podcast today, Jonas David, CEO and Creative Director of Soul Atlas. Hi, Jonas.
Hello. Nice to be here.
I have to say, Joe, it's really great to finally get speaking to you. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, so genuinely appreciate the time. Well, I think I said to you before, I'm an avid fantasy and sci-fi. I won't say geek, right, but I'll say nerd maybe, because I do know a good bit about this stuff. And that's why it's really great to have you on the show, Jonas, because as the CEO of Soul Atlas, which is really this world that you're building right across lots of media. It's a really exciting thing to be involved in. And I suppose it's a good place to start. I'm really interested in your journey to Soul Atlas. How did you get from where you were to here, a scaling business in this fantasy epic world? I'm fascinated how you got here.
Yeah, it began actually when I was in 7th grade. I watched Star Wars. I watched Lord of the Rings. Kind of really ignited that thing. Like from the very first beginning, I was much into writing. I wrote some smaller books for myself, which never got published, thank God. And then later on got the hang of filmmaking. I really liked what I saw with these movies, and unfortunately, these are very expensive genres to make. So for a very long time, I did everything else, every other genre. But then in 2021, 2022, I decided enough was enough, and I was just gonna do it, do what we could. And we wanted to do a TV show, but realized relatively quickly that we didn't have the leverage to, let's say, retain the rights after making it.
Yeah.
And so we thought, okay, hey, what can we do? What can we do in introducing a world to collect an audience so that we have some leverage in the conversation? And that's really how the project got started. And we started doing lore and comics and games and films. Then now we have one movie in post-production and another in development and some other things going on. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. It's interesting, Joe, because I was thinking about you and this journey you've been on, and I know when we spoke earlier, you're in that really interesting scaling phase, right? You've gone from a very small team to starting to scale investment, and everything that goes with that. I'm interested in your own personal observations, feelings, views about yourself as a leader. What have you learned about yourself as a leader? What does even leadership mean to somebody like you? I'm just interested, because you're here now, but there's a lot of pain to get to here, and I know that, having spoken to other entrepreneurs in the creative space.
Yeah. To be honest, I am very fortunate that I get to share the burden of leadership with my co-founders and other people who are in the team. To be honest, it wasn't entirely new to me, because I was, as a director and producer, it's already a kind of leadership position that I grew up into. And the reason why that whole thing started was just because I wanted for things to happen and nobody else would make them happen. So you have to go do it yourself. But now being able to work in this company and now having more than 150 people working on these different projects in the different departments, and also now more and more relying on like multiple layers of coordination is something that that changes how things work. And that also in order for you to be able to do this, you need to change yourself, and that change needs to keep up with where the company needs to go. And so I think I relatively confidently can say that didn't change like mentally as much ever in my life as I did in the last like 4 years, trying to like catch up with the demands of
Yeah.
what we were trying to do. And I think that's really the base observation. And yeah, and in general, like when I look at all the leaders in our company, it becomes very like, like sometimes this is portrayed for simplicity's sake as a pyramid, like leadership of distributed like context and all this. But I really like to think of it as the pyramid flipped. There's things that rest on the peak essentially, and you have responsibility to everybody else, so that it like doesn't tip. And so I think like living with this like pressure for a while is something that that I think changes you, but it's a good thing. It feels heavy, but like it's like not plastic, like it feels like a task that if you fail, it's like there's a certain amount of consequences that are like linked to this. And so as a result, I noticed myself getting really interested in seeing what athletes do, for example, and reading about leaders, and noticing, for example, that everybody like this is an archetype, like leaders go through the same stuff, like the problems.
Yeah, I was interested in your comment around, flipping the pyramid over, because, and I suppose, does that come from your, director producer background? Because you mentioned that word burden, and obviously, I know I'm going to say from the musical theater perspective, there's a huge amount of pressure on the producer to make everything come together, and I'm interested, Jonas, in there's aspects of what you've done as director and producer that's probably given you other aspects of leadership and how you view leadership. So is it more natural that somebody in that producer director role, by its nature, looks at a structure much flatter, because really you have a group of people that you're trying to probably get the best out of creatively, at different times. Do you think your background in that kind of filmmaking side of things has helped thinking about leadership in that way?
For sure. I mean, in filmmaking, and especially if you're on a set, it's all about specialists. Like you have all these specialists that there's no way that a highly trained actor could do what a highly trained gaffer or best boy does. With equipment. There's just like there's and so you really come to respect everybody's like profession and developed skill, and you need their input, and like they need to come essentially to you with the things that they need to be able to work. And of course you have like the structure where you have like the gaffer and best boy, and there is hierarchy, right? And I'm not saying that like typical pyramid removes hierarchy or something, because there needs to be like division of like information, and like it needs some siloing, right? But I think seeing it as something that is that where the bottom serves the top, I think is still is accurate there. It's accurate in the companies we do.
It was really incredible. I think one of the things you said is really interesting to me, because oftentimes we talk about career progression, moving to another role, moving up the ladder, but actually, in a lot of particularly in businesses in your world, having those deep specialists that have a real focus on being the best at that thing that they do enables you to give you confidence and to be a more hands-off leader, maybe in terms of trusting those people. And I just leads me nicely on to my next question, Jonas, which is, you've got this group of very creative people. I know you've got a mix of technical people, but ultimately I'm assuming a lot of people come to Soul Atlas because this is a creative endeavor, right? The same way as people were doing Pixar or would enjoy Disney, whatever you want to say. And I'm just really interested in what you've learned and how you manage to get the best out of all these creative people, right? And I'm assuming as well, Jonas, I know you've got a core team, more centralized, but you've also got quite a distributed group of creative people as well. So I'm wondering how you make, that work. What's the hardest part of managing this creative group? And also what's the good stuff about it, I suppose, the other side.
Yeah. I mean, so like we are always improving like our workflows and like how we do stuff. When you do stuff with art, a lot of the times you have to really listen to your gut and to your intuition and be like, this process, like I can tell that there's quality that we can extract from this process that we're not currently extracting. We're not getting the full potential. I feel it in my gut. It's something that, because we start with research instead of with ideation, like we're not getting, like enough of that, like first impression, like subconscious, like idea stream, and then it becomes very like heady. And so you have to always like go into these processes and be like, okay, what can we do to, in like these very subtle human, like ephemeral places, and you go in and extract the best out of this.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, is it's a peculiarity. That being said, I love working with artists a lot. Like it's essentially, you have a whole organization of creative people, and creativity is essentially problem solving. This means if problems show up, you usually have a group of people who are very, I want to say, like smart in a good way, like they're smart in the sense that like they come in and they if there's a problem, everybody is like, okay, so what can we do about this? And they're used to like going through this through this thing, and they don't expect it to be smooth sailing. And so I really like working with creatives, and it's helpful.
Yeah, and Joe, a question I wanted to ask you, and I'm going off script a little bit here, so apologies in advance to nothing worse than going off script, right? But what really interested me about this organization is this concept of building a world, right? That you've come from the same influences, I would say, that I have, right? And I'm always talking to leaders and organizations around, you're not building journeys, you're actually building worlds, and if you understand what your cultural world is, you can really innovate within that. Just as a matter of interest, you guys have created this architecture of this world, right? And from your perspective, you've been at this a long time now. Having that architecture as a world, does it enable you and your team to be more creative? Because in a way, you're innovating within the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like you have to keep that master plan connected. So I'm just interested in your thoughts, Jonas, on how you found that concept of having a defined world and then working within that world. Has it been empowering? Has it been? I'm just interested in what that has done to creative processes.
I mean, to be honest, I'm always a fan of, instead of whatever you do, if it's something that you would do long term, then doing it long term means commitment, means thinking ahead, means wondering what's going to be in the end. And in our case, like, we know that we're going to be with this endeavor for the next couple of decades, and we committed to this. And so we are thinking, okay, where is this going to go? And to be honest, when you look at creative enterprises, but I think it can also be said for most other things. There's a saying: creative works are not completed; they're abandoned. Because you can always, continue and improve, define and push. And so one of the things that we really like about our world is that it allows us to eternally go deeper and deeper and deeper into the creation. And I think this is actually also what gives us an edge, because like in the industry, it's a lot that like people come in, they get a script, they work on it for 3 years, they disappear and do something else, whatever, and that's the accepted thing, and that's also interesting, because you follow your different curiosities, but we are going to follow our different curiosities within that structure. And that doesn't necessarily like box us in. It just means that we've committed and that we are willing to see to the bottom of it, and of course, never arrive. Like, it's the same with world building. It's an endless task here, and endlessly scope creep into every little element of it. But it is something that I think is also, if you have that aim to continuously push the question of like, what would make this more meaningful, what would this make this, like, to use the clinical term, more awesome, then I think you
love the way you say use the clinical term more awesome.
Yes, it is.
That's the power of contrast right there, Jonas.
No, like we asked, like, the rule of cool, of course, is important when you do like a fantasy world and stuff.
No, I do like that word, actually. How do we make this more awesome? Because it reminds me of I'm a huge fan of Walt Disney, and he was always talking about how do we plus this. Okay, we got to here. How do we plus it? How do we plus it? And it was this continuous cycle of, how do we actually plus it? And Joseph, I'm interested. So obviously you've mentioned a number of times in our discussion, the value of having these brilliant people around you, right, and having these amazing specialists and people that can, I suppose, are switched on, want to go to that level of depth. And I'm interested in you now as a business leader, let's say, in some of the challenges or things you've learned in terms of attracting and keeping the kind of talent that you need. I was really interested in your comment around, 10, 20 years, right? So there's almost like a built-in commitment for the kinds of people that you're looking for. So I'm really interested in what your experience has been of getting those people, finding them, attracting them. How do you talk to them when you're exciting them about this enterprise? So can you give me a bit of that whole talent pool, if you want to call it that?
Yeah. Like this is to a certain degree a bit of an idiosyncrasy with the industry, because in the entertainment industry, people want to be involved with awesome stuff, and in and of itself is a reason to do anything, right? But for me, it's the question is always what's in it for you, and sometimes like I'm looking for the win-win situation, and so I'm thinking about setting up that win-win situation. So for example, I bring with me like a track record doing 50 short films and having some good like cinematic stuff. Now starting this project, it is easy for me to bring my network or bring other people in the industry, because I have a portfolio, and they're like, okay, if this guy is doing this, it's going to come out at the same quality. So they're like, this is something quality, I want to be involved with that. And that was like the base, and we started with that. And then the more that we built, the more real it got, the more it was possible to attract talent that before we didn't think was possible. And like, for example, right now, like what you need to know is that our structure, like right now we work part-time, and we essentially work on profit share, which means nobody of us at this point is getting paid. And so including myself. And so everybody who is here, like we had to very carefully build out an advantage for them so that they would have a reason to be here. And so we have a lot of people who are juniors, who are like getting experience. There are others who get to express themselves in their creative stuff. And the creative role is really, it's a bit simpler, but just recently we managed to, for example, start talking to and getting interested lawyers, right, to join us. And as you can imagine, that's a much bigger compliment to do it for
the world of IP. Yes, of course.
And so that was something where, for example, that's only possible because we've built the marketing side, we've built the production side, we have lots of stuff in the Gipper, we have stuff that we can show. It like looks professional. It's they can tell that there are 4 years of work in it. And now the lawyer joins, it's like, okay, there's actually something happening here, and I'm not signing like a dreamboat,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I just want to explore that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. Because I think one of the things, obviously, from our own work in the Future Work Institute, we're finding more and more where people are, and I don't mean this in a bad way, where people are living their dreams part-time. So in other words, they might have a role because they got to, they've got to keep the lights on. They've got to do. We've all done that, right? You've got to do that stuff that maybe is not quite as interesting, but actually, there's now conduits through platforms, through organizations like yourselves, that will enable people to live out their dreams, even at least in a part-time way, that eventually might turn into something else. I'm kind of interested in the people that are working with you at this moment in time. My assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that they have other things, right? So you're part of their journey, their hero's journey, as opposed to, you being, as traditional organizations would be the hero in their story. Now it's flipped a lot, I think, in the Future Work. Is that what you're seeing in your own group, Jones, including yourself, obviously, on this front? So is that a realistic assumption for me from there?
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to, like, people need to get something else than money. Of course, there's the profit share thing, but that's sort of a long-term thing. It's sort of a bit ephemeral, and our percentages, blah blah blah. What's it really gonna be? We don't know. So like people do this because they want that on their CV, because they want to advance their skills, because they want to work with awesome people, because doing the thing for its own sake seems interesting to them, because they want to be able to have done this and show it to their friends or prove it to themselves, or whatever it is that brings them to us and that lets them like work with us. It's like it's something going on there that they get out of it, and then they do it part-time, and they do it next to the thing, and in many ways that makes us kind of like their side hustle. I mean, of course, time-wise and schedule-wise, it does sometimes bring challenges. But it also really relaxes what we do because we are essentially not running on a crazy burn rate, right? Like we have 150 people,
yeah.
and our burn rate is essentially zero, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting perspective, Jonas, and it's actually an interesting theme that's coming up, particularly people that I speak to in the artistic and creative space, in that,
Mm.
you know, in this world, the journey is probably as important as the destination, because you're going through many, restories, rewrites, reconceptualization, adding here, taking away there, tweaking there, and then ultimately this turns into something that's so fully formed that it, feels so handmade that it couldn't come with anywhere else. And Jones, I want to ask you one last question. I always like to try to leave a legacy type question, and my big question to you is, you've committed to this, and you have a number of people committed to this journey by creating this incredible world. And I'm really interested in what kind of impact you hope that Soul Atlas will have on the world. So if you're looking back 15, 20 years from now and you put all of this work in, I'm just really interested in the impact that you'd like Soul Atlas to have.
I think so. What I've observed over the last 10 years is that big IPs that I enjoyed in the past had an extremely mixed bag of releases that were incoherent, didn't belong together, were made by different creators, had like political agendas like shoehorned into them and everything. And I'm not a fan of that. I would like to create an IP that's a safe haven, that stays out of the culture war, and that creates a that where creation is consistent, where the audience and the creators have a proper relationship, not like audience big corporation, but something where we can where the trust that you invest into a universe when you spend time with it is rewarded, right? Because this is something, when I start following Star Wars and I'm down to the comics and the games and the films, I get into the lore. I spent a lot of time with this stuff, and then I don't want to have somebody running around and like violating my trust by giving decisions that are based on the Q1 like financial reports, And so this is stuff that, like, on the technical side is important to me, but on the creative side, I would really like to see something that would I think stories are equipment for living, and I want to create a place where you can come in, you can tell that every story that is here there's something in there that is for you, that you can take with that helps you think more deeply about life, and of course also have lots of fun there. It's a fantasy universe. That's like a lot what this is about, but I would have that ambition, and I do believe, because we have multiple things going on at the same time that interlink, that eventually when we get there, when we figure out how to do this really, really well, that we can create an immersive experience that becomes like the kind of what we had with Avengers Endgame, essentially, by building that sense of ongoing timeline progression, like characters starting to meet each other on multiple mediums across the entire lineup. And this is something that I like, again, to have something again in life that doesn't fill you with apathy. It's like, another Star Wars movie about, what was that, The Mandalorian? I guess I don't know if I'm going to watch that. It's like I want to have something. I'm like, yes, it's coming into Star Wars. I can't wait. This is the kind of thing that I would like to.
I love that. And couldn't think of a better way to end the interview, Jonas. So, Jonas, thank you very much indeed. Jonas David, CEO and Creative Director of Soul Atlas. I would definitely implore anybody out there to follow and look at what the guys are doing. Some really interesting stuff there. And I'm also going to take your word as well, Jonas, and say there's some seriously awesome stuff that you guys are working on at the moment. So, Jonas, thanks very much for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing your journey over the next number of years.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, guys, for listening or watching wherever you are. That's the end of the podcast. Really looking forward to the next one coming very soon. Please stay tuned, and remember, you can listen or watch this podcast across all of the popular channels, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.